Another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends over at Branded Bills. Go to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Thank you guys for your patience this week. Been very much under the weather up until about 10 minutes ago. I looked homeless, hadn't shaved the last couple of days, only showered like once. It was pretty gnarly. But we've got a lot to get into. We've got a lot of portal talk today. We'll talk about where some of the former Rams are headed. We'll talk about some of the latest additions. I'll talk hoops in the second half of the show, as Jacob Kennedy says in the Toyota chat. After patiently waiting through football season for basketball, now it's time to look forward to football again because we are so back, baby. Does feel a little bit ironic after all the comments about when does basketball season start that we're now in the exact same position. Man, I cannot wait for spring ball, and I haven't said that in a long time. When you have a first-year program, spring ball is pretty exciting, even in the second year. Once you get into like a third and fourth year, there's just not a lot of storylines to dive into that are a secret, so it hasn't been all that exciting the last couple of spring cycles. But obviously, with so much change, there's going to be a lot to learn, and I'm really looking forward to it. Again, we'll dive into quite a bit. If you wouldn't mind hitting a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. If you're listening later on the audio only side and you haven't rated us 5 stars or left a comment, I certainly would appreciate that as well. Helps the algorithm, helps me look good for my bosses. So be homies and hook it up for me if you wouldn't mind. Congratulations, Trey McBride. Just wanted to lead with that since we haven't had an opportunity to go live since he was named a first-team All-Pro. Proud to be, man. It could not have happened to a better person. I've talked about Trey a lot. We've talked about his season a lot in recent shows, so we won't go through all the numbers and all that again. It was a record-breaking season, broke the NFL single-season record for receptions by a tight end, broke the Arizona Cardinals record, for just total receptions, period. What he is doing right now is pretty exciting. And as I wrote, you should check it out on the website if you haven't. It's actually a piece that's open for everybody, so even if you're not a diehard, you can read that one. Feels like he's on a Travis Kelce-esque ascension in terms of what to expect from him in the upcoming years. Just one of those tight ends that's going to put up stat lines that put a lot of wide receivers to shame. What he is doing with Arizona is crazy, especially when you factor in the instability of the franchise, the fact that he really hasn't gotten to play with a real NFL quarterback to this point. Just imagine what he could do if he had the type of quarterback play that Kelce has had with Mahomes. I mean, I'd settle for a veteran Alex Smith at this point, who Kelce played with early in his career. And same thing from a coaching and schematic standpoint. I mean, they definitely prioritized him in the offense a lot like what you could say about when he was at CSU. With a different system, maybe he's not getting the same target load that he's gotten with Arizona in recent years because they just don't have a lot of talent at the skill positions. I still think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a stud, but what he's doing right now is pretty crazy. And I agree with the Toyota chat here. The fact that he wasn't a unanimous selection is just pretty asinine. George Kittle getting a vote, while I love George Kittle, is crazy. He played in like 11 games this year. And I don't know how you can look at somebody breaking the single season record for receptions by a tight end and not think, yeah, that was the best tight end in football this year. It's just silly. There was a great rant from Ocho Cinco and Shannon Sharp on one of their shows they do together about how sometimes writers, and I agree with this, they want to get too cute. I think you see this with the Hall of Fame selection process in baseball a lot. People just want to stand out, and it results in some pretty silly stuff. I was watching the Nuggets last night. This is a completely random aside, and we won't derail the show too much. But just a couple of things I wanted to hit on in the intro. It's funny how pettiness and hatred, when it not real hatred, sports hatred, which is different, but it's funny how that just never goes away. I'm watching Derek Queen against the Nuggets before that just brutal CSU basketball game. And again, we'll talk about that later on in the show. I don't feel like leading off with it. It was that bad. But it's funny, Derek Queen, it's not his fault. The officials didn't call a travel there, but he got away with the travel. Maryland goes to the Sweet 16. CSU gets screwed. It's just one of those that it's forever going to burn passionately in my heart. And I think he's going to have a really nice NBA career. I like his game. I think he's fun to watch. But I can't help but root against the guy because I'm salty. I'm salty that CSU didn't go to the Sweet 16. I don't think I'll ever forgive him for it. And again, it's not even his fault. I know that, but it's just funny how that kind of stuff works. And same thing, as a Broncos fan, got the BVP Broncos jersey on, as I said I would. Going up against Josh Allen this weekend, I have far more animosity for Josh Allen in my heart from his Wyoming days than I ever will from his Buffalo Bill days. They smacked the Broncos in the playoffs last year. I was just happy to be there at that point. Never thought they had a chance to win that game. This weekend's different, but that dude tormented me when I was in college. Came into Hughes and smacked the Rams around on that infamous gray uniform night where they wear the traditional unis and warm-ups, get cute, and then come out in the all grays, just get thumped. Then in 2017, the game's there for the taking, turns into a whiteout in the second half, and Josh Allen single-handedly found a way to come back and win that game. Some really questionable decisions from Mike Bobo in that matchup as well. But the sports hatred, it takes a long time to dissipate. And I certainly still have beef with Derek Queen, even though it's not his fault at all that he got away with that travel. Before we talk about Brayden Fowler-Nicolosi committing to Michigan, I wanted to give just a couple of general thoughts on college football this winter and it feeling more shameless than ever. I've made a lot of these points before, so I'm going to try not to be too repetitive, but I do feel like there have just been some pretty glaring instances over the last couple of weeks of just individuals taking selfishness to a new level. And I don't even necessarily fault these guys specifically for taking advantage of the system and putting themselves in what they believe is to be a better position. Like Lane Kiffin going to LSU, he feels like that's the best thing for his career. I don't really understand it. You're going to LSU because you want a chance to win a national championship. You're walking away from a team that's in the CFP. I understand that over a decade, who's going to likely be in contention more frequently, Ole Miss or LSU, but he just kind of feels like one of those coaches that's always going to be chasing something. I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now he's leaving LSU for USC or, going back there, or Ohio State or something like that. He's just one of those guys. But just the way that he handled that whole situation was shameless. And you look at the situation in Boulder this week with Jordan Seaton, and I'm genuinely not even coming from a rivalry perspective here, just a state of college football as a whole, to see that guy walk out on CU after everything they did for him. I mean, they basically made him the face of the program along with, Juju, and was certainly one of Deion's guys, like it was just one of those instances that was like, man, this is where we're at with college football. There really is no loyalty either way, whether it's a coach to the program and players that he recruited and signed, or a player inside the program. Being a captain doesn't seem to mean much to a lot of these guys anymore. Wearing the school colors don't really mean a whole lot. Rivalries and traditions, they don't matter to the schools or the conferences or the TV networks. All that matters is me and my money. And you can't really fault people for having that mindset. It's natural. But there used to at least be an illusion that there was something greater than just, individual gratification and all of this. Playing for your school meant something. Representing your community meant something. And there was certainly always an element of seediness to college football. I'm not ignorant to that. Players have been getting paid under the table long before any of this NIL stuff happened, but there was at least somewhat of an effort from the coaches, from the players to keep up the facade, even if it was that there was greater meaning in all of this. And I think a lot of it is the game has just changed. Like the mentality of these players has changed, but it's just been a tough winter, I think, for the traditional college football fan, a purist like myself who romanticizes a lot of what we're losing in the sport today, and that is, the traditions and the rivalries and just some of what, I loved about college football. Because again, like I've made this rant so many times, but if your goal is to just be a generic version of the NFL, you will lose that game every single time. What we loved about college football, honestly, like the quality of play mattered and stuff, but so much about it was the uniqueness and the tradition and the rivalries and the pageantry and the stadiums and, like, seeing these matchups that you see year after year after year. And man, it's just gotten shameless. It's gotten downright shameless, and it bums me out. Again, like, you can't paint with too broad of a brush. Not all of these kids are chasing a check, although plenty of them are. There are also plenty of kids who are being told to hit the door. That's a part of college football today too, in a far broader way than it ever was in the past. But it does bum me out to just kind of see like where we're at and see just how open I guess the players and the coaches are when it comes to all of this. Like, at least lie to me a little bit, like WWE, like make it seem like it's real. I don't know. It's bummed me out. I will say shout out to Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. He's a guy who had $6.5 million offered to go to Miami, and he basically is choosing to go to the NFL instead because, one, I think he's just ready to be a pro. He's been in college for 4 or 5 years now, but he talked about, it wasn't just a gesture or wordplay from him. Being a captain, means something to him. Being a part of that program means something to him, and to just throw that away to go play at Miami, that's all he would ever be known for. So it makes me appreciate those types of guys even more. As Cam says here in the Twitter chat, he's a Buffs fan. But CU is cooking in the portal, though they're going to lose player, but they get great players back. That's fair perspective, Cam. I think there's something to that in the sense that, they can't afford to throw, $3 million at him to try and keep him because you've got a lot more positions to fill. It's a similar argument to what I would have said with Owen Long at CSU. Yeah, you'd love to keep a guy like him. You've got far more needs than that when it comes to, trying to match the resources of some of these bigger programs. It's going to be tough to do. I will say, I feel like in Seton's case specifically, doing it at this stage of the portal is pretty rough. That's a low blow, just considering they, again, could have used those resources. They still can. You're going to be able to take that money and put it elsewhere that you were going to use on him. But the timing of it all, and apparently he told the program he was coming back, and like they made him a video, and then he used that video to announce that he was going in the portal. It was not a good look on his part. Again, I don't really fault him for chasing the money that's certainly being offered his way. There's no guarantees in football. We see guys get injured all the time. Like Jake Butt is always an example that comes to mind of somebody who appeared to be on the schedule to be a great NFL player, gets hurt late in his career at Michigan, never ends up happening. So I understand the idea of, I'm going to get what's mine right now. I'm going to take advantage of my market value. I think a lot of people would do that in their own careers. It's just it's, even if it was more of an illusion, like even if these guys were more interested in their own selfish opportunities back in the day, like that there was an effort to keep up the perception that like all of this other stuff mattered. And it just feels like now we're at a point where we've thrown all of that out the window. And maybe that's me being an old man. I'm an old man about a lot of things. I understand that. But that's where I'm at with it. We'll get into all the recruiting stuff. Let me take a quick break real quick. Shout out a couple of our awesome partners, and then we'll keep it rolling. Let me start by talking to you about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. So whether you're conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you, like the all-new Tacoma and the return of the iconic Land Cruiser. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. Like the 4Runner, that's what makes them perfect for Colorado living. If you want to hit the ski slopes, if you want to, go on cross-country road trips, they have great options. You don't have to sacrifice the gas mileage without that all-wheel drive capability, which is so clutch in Colorado, although, you've pretty much been good with the little compact car of late with how little snow we've gotten. I'm sure it'll flip at some point. There's 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. And again, Toyota SUVs, they take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. I also want to talk to you about our presenting sponsor, and that, of course, is Branded Bills. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, look no further than Branded Bills. They'll get you started with some awesome custom headwear. We have DNVR hats through them. We have Avs and Nuggets and Broncos now, on top of some really slick just DNVR designs in general. We've got a white hat with a black bill that I like a lot. If you're looking for a new CSU hat, though, Branded Bills has you covered as part of their campus collection. I've been seeing more and more Ram fans, like at Moby and just on campus in general, with the CSU Branded Bills hats on. They've got a lot of different options. I've got the gold one here back on set. I rock my black one a lot. I've got a camo snapback. That's probably my favorite. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love to our friends at Branded Bills. All right. Let's talk about BFN. Let's talk about Brayden Fowler-Nicolosi and his commitment to Michigan, which unsurprisingly drew a lot of takes on social media. He is controversial is probably not the right word, although he has had some controversial moments throughout his career. But he is someone who generates attention, who gets the conversation going. It's certainly been good for business as far as clicks go on my show over the years. A guy who made some enemies in Boulder. Obviously, they kind of got the last laugh on that one. But Brayden landing at Michigan had a lot of people surprised just because he got benched this past season, which is the reality. He did not play well in those first couple of games. I've heard he might have been hurt. But either way, it was not at all what you needed to see from a quarterback, who was in his third year as a starter at that point, and who we had heard the staff for months and months talk up about how, there were some lumps suffered early on in the career, but now was when we were going to get the payoff. And then to see the offense struggle the way they did, especially against, UTSA and Northern Colorado. We actually played decent against Washington. It makes you wonder, what happened between then and those next couple of weeks. It was just crazy to see how it all fell apart. I mean, he's a guy who always kind of struggled with consistency throughout his career, but also he very clearly has physical tools that are intriguing. It's why coaches, fall in love with a guy like him. He does have NFL arm talent. Now, I've talked a lot about how his mechanics are inconsistent, his footwork especially, and it was something that Jay kind of conceded late in the process, although it did kind of feel like he was throwing him under the bus at that point. If we're being real, if he was aware of the footwork, well, then why didn't you drill it home in these last couple of years, and make him fix it? It's great to be able to do some of the off-platform stuff, but I think at times quarterbacks today, they want to be Patrick Mahomes so bad that they struggle with basic dropbacks, and they end up missing easy throws. And if you can't make the layups, it doesn't matter if you can do a windmill dunk. You've got to be able to do the basic stuff with consistency, and that was just an issue that kind of eluded him pretty consistently over the second half of his career. Obviously started great, burst out onto the scene, had a great game in that first Rocky Mountain Showdown, even though CSU ended up losing the game. I think that was more on coaching decisions and a terrible call on Kamara getting ejected for targeting in that game was lame. There's a million reasons the Rams lost that game, but he just never really was able to build off of it after that really exciting 2023 season. And he did put up big numbers that year, like throwing for close to 3,000 yards, close to 3,500 yards, 22 touchdowns. Obviously had too many interceptions, but he did some exciting stuff. The Holy Holker against Boise State. He had some exciting moments as a quarterback. It was just far too inconsistent, unfortunately. And, while Jackson Brousseau and some of these other guys struggled to lead the offense, you kind of understood why the Rams decided to move on when they did this past season. Now, as far as him landing at Michigan goes, I don't expect him to be the starting quarterback, although I don't know. We'll see what happens. Whittingham's kind of an old school coach. I don't know if they're going to just name Underwood the starter without any competition whatsoever, but they're paying the dude a ton of money. So it would be very surprising to me if he wasn't, but he has an opportunity here to go into, a program with a solid OC, coming over from Utah Beck, I believe his last name is. And, maybe he's able to work on some things. Maybe he's able to, kind of basically take advantage of a change of scenery, which was probably needed on both sides at this point. I am rooting for him to succeed. I'm rooting for all these kids that are transferring out to have it work out well for them. It was unfortunate that things played out the way they did, especially some of these younger guys. You see the 8-win season in 2024, and you're thinking, man, like this could be the start of something special. And then it ends up just being a season from hell in every regard. And I want to be clear, like BFN struggles were a part of the problem last year, but he's far from the reason. This team only won 2 games, obviously didn't even get an extended opportunity, to keep it going. But even aside from that, it was just one of those years where everything that could have gone wrong did. And now you go to Michigan, maybe you can get coached up, probably going to be in that Mikey Keene role. He went from Fresno to Michigan last year, didn't play, was the backup. Believe he entered the portal. I'm not sure where he's landed since. But sometimes a change of scenery can be good for you. And frankly, I see a lot of people be like, well, why wouldn't he go to a smaller school where he maybe has an opportunity to play? That's fair. There's also probably, a world where you can get like $600,000 to be the backup at Michigan. And I don't know if that's what he's getting made. That's just a hypothetical. Or, like $80K to be a starter in the MAC or something like that. Obviously, better opportunity to play and maybe prove your way to the NFL, but maybe it's a long-term play too. I can't speak for him. I'm not surprised, though, that from Michigan's standpoint, you add a kid who has a ton of starting experience. So if the Bryce Underwood experiment fails and he didn't exactly look like a phenomenal passer last year, you have somebody who has game experience, who does have a big arm. Again, like there are traits that you like about Brayden, and there's untapped potential there for a variety of reasons. I'm not here to make excuses for him. I think he could have done some things behind the scenes that would have set himself up better for success. I also think there are a lot of reasons and a lot of factors that were out of his control altogether that really didn't put him in a position to maximize his abilities. I don't think the scheme changes were beneficial to his development. It might have been better for CSU competitively in 2024. Like I think you probably win 8 games. You're able to grind out some of those close games that maybe you don't. But I don't think it was what was best for Brayden, because Brayden is somebody who was better at spreading it out, at going tempo, at stretching the field, and they put him under center, which he'd never done in his career. Like there are a lot of things there that I think were kind of wonky and impacted him. I think that the wide receiver position being a revolving door didn't help. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can point to, but it ultimately was a big reason why this season didn't work out, and it was a big reason why Norvell's tenure didn't work out. He wasn't able to maximize Brayden, and the offense just kind of fell apart altogether. That's not on Brayden. It would be unfair to put it all on him. But we'll see what happens with all this. I'm not surprised, though, that they were able to find him a P4 landing spot, because especially a school like Michigan, who's got money to blow, why not add a veteran to that room, especially if he's on board, with potentially being the number 2 guy. So we'll see what happens there. It was kind of interesting that it was Michigan specifically, but he's got a big arm, and coaches want experienced quarterbacks in the room. You can never have too many experienced quarterbacks in the room. It's why, I've said, even if you wouldn't have wanted to go into the year with, Brousseau competing for the starting gig, because while he's a really good kid, he was put in a terrible spot and handled it admirably. He's just not an FBS capable starting quarterback physically. I think he's intelligent enough, but I just think that you would have loved to have him back, one, because he's a great leader, and he's, somebody who's already shown that he can handle a tough spot with dignity and class, but also just the simple concept of it's good to have guys who have been there before, who have seen the field. You never know what might happen. I mean, there are years where all of a sudden you start losing 2-3 quarterbacks, and then, you're playing a walk-on or whoever it may be. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Again, I wish Brayden well. He was always good to me, respectful. I wish it would have worked out differently for him, because had it, CSU would have been far more successful in recent years. And I hope he's able to figure it out down the line, as well as, all these guys. If you missed it, Jordan Ross committed to Arizona. He will leave CSU with 26 catches for 302 yards and 1 touchdown. Former 4-star guy, just didn't work out. Struggled to stay on the field this year with injuries. Also potentially got suspended late, kind of clashed with the staff a little bit post Norvell. I think he was just frustrated, though. I think there were a lot of guys that were frustrated in that locker room, and unsurprisingly so. We'll see, how it works out for him at Arizona. I do think he's good enough to be on the field. He almost landed at Wyoming, so I am glad it's not somewhere they're going to have to play him with consistency. They do have a couple of games scheduled against Arizona down the line. I don't remember the years, though, or if it will line up with when Ross is still there. But it is kind of another example of why you have to take all of the recruiting rankings stuff with a grain of salt. It's not to say that they're meaningless. They're graded on what they believe to be NFL traits, and it's kind of a projection more than anything. But, sometimes when you come in with all of this expectation, it can really set you up for failure, because even if you're a decent player, it feels like you haven't lived up to what was predetermined for you, by this very subjective ranking process. And then, sometimes they can get nasty with the fans, or again, it just feels like, even if you're on the field and producing, that, man, like, we thought you were going to be so much more than this. Under different circumstances, maybe that would have been the case. Leaves again, CSU 26 catches, 302 yards and 1 touchdown. Bummer, because, he was somebody who, when he came in, like Jack Howell and all the veterans on the team were just like, look out, this kid is for real. He's got all the potential in the world. He certainly got the speed. But I think the turf toe set him back this past year, and then the season was just a mess altogether. And, again, there are a lot of factors with why the offense struggled this year, but it just felt like everything compounded on top of each other, both in the big picture sense, but also just like every individual and their struggle, it all just added up. But you wish him well. Again, another good kid. It just didn't work out here. Hopefully it does in Tucson. I mean that towards all these people. I keep saying it because I don't want people to be like, well, he said that Jordan Ross was a good kid, and Javion's a good kid. Why didn't he say Morley and Britt? They're all good kids. Justin Marshall is Liberty bound, 260 carries for 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns over 3 seasons, 18 catches for 159 yards. Explosive runner. You see that what was in the Hawaii game. He had that big touchdown. Hard worker, maybe underused at times, but also durability struggles make it tough in that sense. I do think he's another one where a change of scenery was probably just necessary. I kind of got usurped in the rotation these last couple of years, or and passed over, I guess would be a better way to put it. But he is somebody who, under the right circumstances, can be a productive player. Wish him well. Javion Kennard going to San Diego State, I'm not going to lie, that one hurts a little bit more. I'm a little surprised he didn't land P4. I would have imagined he had some interest, but maybe, San Diego State threw a big bag at him. That I can admit that living in San Diego would be pretty great. It's an awesome campus. He also feels like a vintage San Diego State player, just like an explosive running back that's dynamic in the return game. How many of those have they had over the years? The Pennies and Humphreys of the world. 18 catches for 228 yards and a touchdown. Also averaged 23 yards a punt and had the punt return for a score this past year. Should have had another touchdown if it wasn't for a bullshit taunting call in Boise, which is one of the softest moments I saw from an official all season long. Just ridiculous. But it does sting that you're going to have to play against him because he is an explosive guy, the kind of player who only takes 2 or 3 touches to potentially break open a game and really flip things wide open. So you hope that doesn't come back to haunt you down the line. We'll see. You said that you would have said the same thing about Lewis Brown at San Diego State, and that didn't exactly work out all that well in the end. So we'll see. Tanner Morley, I think like right after we ended the show on Friday, went and committed to Kansas State. That does feel like a good fit for him and a place he would assumingly have an opportunity to get playing time, which is what I hope for all these kids that do go to the bigger schools. You don't want to end up being a depth piece. We saw Boom Jock go from being a 100 tackle guy to not even a special teams player from Cal and ultimately leaving their program. Not sure where he's going to end up in the end. But another one that's tough to lose, but at least you won't have to play against him. A lot of these guys landing in the Big 12. Dupree goes to KU. We'll be interested to see what kind of run he gets. Again, I just hope that he gets an opportunity to maximize himself and doesn't just end up being one at a bunch, which we've seen happen. Sometimes you're Chase Wilson, you go and start and you ball out for West Virginia. Sometimes you're Boom Jock at Cal, or, there are a million examples over the years where the grass has proved to not be greener in the end, even if the cash up front was. But you wish all these guys well after a coaching change. You can't be bitter about, players wanting to look elsewhere. It's just a product of the system. That said, a lot to be excited about as far as the incoming transfers for CSU. I know there were some people kind of panicking because there weren't a ton of guys coming in over the first, 72 hours or so. I think a lot of that had to do with, the Rams prioritizing a quarterback and then wanting to work from there. You end up landing Haas Haney, who is really exciting. I've already said it a couple times, but he feels like the most athletic quarterback prospect CSU signed, at least in my lifetime. Just the type of guy in the open field you don't see very often, and he's a good passer. And there's a lot to like there. I don't want to get too carried away because I just lectured everybody about not letting recruiting rankings set players up for failure. Let's let him get in the system. Let's see how it all works out. But obviously, there's a ton of potential there. It feels like the ceiling is really high. But I like a lot of the offensive guys they brought in of late. I also am pretty intrigued by a couple of the defenders they picked up. We'll start with Oliver Lundberg Coleman, 5'10", 200-pound back out of UConn. He is from Gothenburg, Sweden, so kind of an interesting background. You've got somebody coming in from Quebec this cycle. You also have somebody coming over, technically from UConn, but by way of Sweden. He had 23 carries for 138 yards and a touchdown as a redshirt freshman this past year. Was somebody who got in the mix more after Jaden, he goes by Mel Brown, was injured and out for the season. Both those backs will be coming to CSU this cycle. I think, 3 or 4 running backs in total? 1, 2, 3 UConn backs in total now. Oliver Lundberg Coleman, Malachi Greaves, who we talked a little bit about on Friday, 5'9" speedster out of Queens, New York, kind of has some, this is such a generic comparison for a small back of his size, but kind of shades of Darren Sproles, quick in the open field, gets lost, between the offensive linemen, and then all of a sudden, comes barreling out of the dust, and it's, a gain of 20. I'm intrigued by all 3 of these running backs that are coming in. Stylistically, it feels like you have some versatility, but you have some experience too, which is always going to be big. You hope to land Cam Edwards, who went to Michigan State. always kind of felt like he was going to be a long shot just based on the amount of money he was going to command. But to land all three of these guys, I do feel like is significant because also, stylistically, they are equipped to play the way you're going to want to play in the system. And I do think I think it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic with these, mobile quarterbacks. If it's a lot more, RPO type stuff, are you getting guys in motion more based on some of the receivers you're bringing in? It feels like that could be in the possibility too. But I do hope that we can get Price Tracy on the show at some point to kind of dive into that here in the next couple of months. Keeping it moving, the wide receiving core is really starting to shape up nicely. Reginald Vick Jr. especially feels like the big play threat that the Rams have been lacking in recent years. You had hoped it might turn into Armani Winfield, post Torrey Horton. Armani could really run, had some struggles with drops at various points, also kind of struggled to get open at times, but maybe some untapped potential there. He committed to South Florida. You wish him well. But Vic, 6'3", 198 pounds, went to Wake Forest for a year, didn't really do anything there. Prior to that, though, he was a D2 star at Virginia Union. He's the cousin of Michael Vick, who obviously played for Jim Mora. I do wonder if that relationship factored into this at all. But 48 catches for 1,164 yards and 12 touchdowns in 24, almost 25 yards a catch. And when you watch him on video, I think what really stands out is the yak ability. Looking at those numbers, I just kind of assumed it was going to be a lot of deep shots down the field. Kind of assumed it was going to be a lot of vertical routes. But surprisingly, or at least to me, it was a lot of stuff underneath and him breaking tackles. He uses that size well, good frame. The Rams have also kind of lacked that in recent years. Feels like they've been kind of small at the receiver position since Justice Ross Simmons left. But he's elusive in the open field. He uses that size to advantage. He's hard to bring down. Somebody, when you do throw it up, uses the body well to shield, and go up and get it. Good hands. But that ability to extend the play and create yards after the catch has been lacking for CSU post Torrey Horton. And I'm hoping that Reginald Vick Jr. can be the guy that kind of gives you an element of that out wide. You need far more explosiveness. You need far more big plays. It was just such a vanilla looking offense last year. It was both bad and boring, which is the worst spot to be in as a football fan, is when your team is not only uncompetitive, but also stylistically, they are a snooze fest. And give me, early to mid Fairchild before it all fell apart. They go to the bowl the first year, but at least like in 08, 09-ish, they lost a lot of shootouts. There's a lot of 44-41. They weren't a good team, but the games were at least fun. These last couple of years, it's just been, it's like you're trying to prepare yourself to study or something. All right, I guess we got to watch CSU, it was just brutal. Jordan Mosley keeping it on the receiving core, 6 foot, 195-pound receiver, the most experienced of the most recent additions. He was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school, initially, signed with Northwestern, redshirted a year there, spent the last 3 years at Mississippi State, so he will presumably come to CSU with 1 year of eligibility to play. Played in 43 games, made 13 starts for the Bulldogs. 6 foot, 195, so doesn't have the size that Vic does, but great hands, plays bigger than his size. I shared that touchdown that he had against Florida. I think that was 2024, where he goes up and makes a nice contested catch to the defensive back. There was another play that I found just on Twitter when you search his name, where he made kind of a crazy catch where he fights through PI and in the middle of the field and brings it in. So you like that mentality from a guy of his size. If you are 6 foot, 195, you're going to have to play bigger than that. 36 catches, 441 yards, 5 touchdowns in his career. An intriguing player and somebody you wonder, if he was moderately productive in the SEC, maybe he comes to CSU and he's able to take things to the next level against obviously less athletic defensive backs and stuff like that. He's intriguing. I think him and Vic on top of, some of the UConn kids that are coming over. We'll talk about them in a sec, but also, you'll have Levon Brown back and Tommy Maher and possibly Kojo Antwi. That's not confirmed as of right now, but I haven't seen anything about him portaling. Haven't seen anything on Stephon Daly either. So fingers crossed on those two, because I think both those guys have some untapped potential. Stephon Daly, a bigger receiver. Kojo, obviously a speedster. Just coming off of that Achilles, was not able to get it going this past season. But you do have some veterans who obviously have plus traits and were in Power 4 programs who will potentially have an opportunity to break out here. You hope they do. But you also hope that some of these young guys coming over from UConn are able to pop. Mekhi Johnson, 6'2", 185 pounds, good size. Did not record any stats this past freshman year, but he's been in the system. He's worked with Bryce Tracy, played for Jim Mora, who's more of a defensive coach, but you know what I mean? Just likes being in his program. 51 catches for 1,051 yards, 10 touchdowns as a senior. That was at Clearwater International Academy down in Florida. Also played some corner and safety. He's a guy who runs well. I wouldn't say he's quick based on what I saw in Huddle, more of that like long speed, not as big, and I'm not trying to create a comparison for him, but just like when you see the plays he made, it reminded me of Demarius Thomas at Georgia Tech, where it's a lot of slants, a lot of vertical routes, and good luck trying to tackle that guy. It's a little high school defensive back, just a big frame, runs well. He's somebody who can hurt you in a variety of ways, but once he gets moving, he's going to be somebody that's tough to bring down. I think he's going to have big play potential. Ended up signing with UConn over offers from Iowa State, Central Florida, Indiana. So there was some P4 interest there, somebody who potentially can pop for you. And I like that they were able to get some of these guys who, Mora and Bryce Tracy believed in and were obviously prioritizing for the future of their program at UConn. Terrence Smith might be the most unique addition of this wide receiver bunch. 5'10", 165 pounds. He was a Swiss Army knife at UConn, but especially in high school. He played quarterback. Is a lot of just like him dropping back and taking off, QB power, QB draw type stuff. But he's a walking highlight. His high school film is fun to watch. He threw for 2,616 yards and 20 touchdowns, but he rushed for 3,648 yards and 47 touchdowns. He set a South Aiken high school record for all-purpose yards with over 6,000 in his high school career. This past season, he was able to get on the field, ran the ball 14 times for 75 yards, plus had 4 catches for 34 yards, 1 touchdown as a freshman with UConn, an explosive runner with good vision. Even though he's a little bit undersized, he's only listed at 5'10", 165 pounds, so he's significantly undersized. But he doesn't get too cute, in terms of his running style. It's pretty north-south, but he has these kind of subtle little cuts in the open field that allow him to evade defenders, without breaking stride. He's a natural playmaker, and he's a home run hitter, and he's somebody who I'm excited to see how they get him involved, because I think, with that breakaway speed and with the elusivity, there's a lot you can do from a screen game, but also crossers and just stuff like that. Like, he's somebody you just want to get the ball in his hands in space and go from there. Maybe you line him up out of the backfield at times and you do some swing passes and stuff like that. Maybe you just simply come up with like some reverse stuff where you take advantage of his throwing ability. I mean, he's really exciting, and I'm interested to see how they get him in the mix this year. I think he's an exciting addition for CSU. As is Peyton Stewart, kind of moving to the trenches here. I'm just rolling through these different commits. Not a lot of rhyme or reason, just going, position to position. Peyton Stewart, along with Tryon Johnson, means you have a couple of massive framed offensive tackles who are coming in young, which you love. 6'7", 308 pounds. So really, really like that frame for such a youngster. He comes over as a redshirt sophomore, spent 2 years at Michigan State. In the 2024 cycle, On3 had him as the number 3 player out of the state of Washington, was top 15 unanimously with all the sites. He also played basketball in high school, which I love. Not a ton to go off of, just given that he hasn't, played at Michigan State yet. But you like somebody with that frame and versatile athletic profile, just basketball. I feel like is big for footwork. I mean, wrestling is probably the one sport, if you could have somebody in the trenches do outside of football, that would be the most beneficial for you. But I do think there's some stuff when it comes to lateral agility and just general explosiveness that benefits you from playing basketball. The multi-sport offensive lineman has definitely been a big emphasis for the Rams the last couple of years. You look at a lot of the guys they've brought in, and some of these guys that are even going to be sticking around, like Philip Ocon, is like a jiu-jitsu star. They do some different stuff, which is exciting. I'm really interested to see what he likes or what he looks like. And I think, him and Tarian Johnson, if I had to guess, would be your front runners to be the starting tackles, although we'll kind of see what happens and who else they're able to bring in. And then how some of these younger guys in the program, like the Zach Smiths of the world are able to make a leap, having already been in the program for a while. On the defensive side, you add Stefan Wright, 6'5", 285 pounds, big frame. He is a grown-ass man. This is, I think, his 7th year of college football. He's lost like 3 seasons to injury, plus everybody got 2020 back. Started at Arizona State. He was there for 2 years. Was at SMU for a couple of years. Then he was at Texas Southern, which I think was the most complete season he played. Went to UConn last year, only played in 4 games, got hurt again, unfortunately. Was a 4-star guy coming out of high school, had offers from all over, Oregon, Bama, Nebraska, OU, you name it. But just injuries have slowed him down. So, you hope he's able to figure it out. We have seen people in the past, like Scott Patchen, who struggled to stay on the field at Miami. He comes to CSU, he figures it out, ends up, having an all-conference campaign. So there are scenarios where that works out, but there's also healthy room for skepticism, just given the durability concerns at this point, right? Like you got to see it to be able to believe it at this point. But you like that he comes over. Antaron Turner, 6'2", 241-pound linebacker out of Wisconsin. Started at Western Carolina, which is where he made a name for himself. Didn't do much with the Badgers last year. I think he played special teams a little bit. But 61 tackles, 6.5 for loss, and 3 sacks as a redshirt sophomore in 2024. He prefers to go by Ant, so we'll call him Ant Turner moving forward. Physical backer, moves well, impactful run stopper. That's what stood out the most to me, kind of watching his film from Western Carolina. I also think he's somebody, though, that you can send off the edge and can be impactful as an edge rusher. Physically, when you look at him, and it gets kind of weird when you start doing the evaluation stuff. We used to joke about this on the draft pod all the time, but like when you start talking about how guys look the part and, like, oh man, look at those muscles, it makes me laugh a little bit. But he is somebody who physically looks the part. And you can see with the way he moves, with what he looks like out there, why he had power for interest coming out of Western Carolina. It didn't work there, but deceptively feels like he could be one of the bigger additions for CSU in the portal. All right. Keep it nice in the Toyota chat, guys. I don't care if it's Rams and Buffs fans going back and forth, but if you start getting nasty with each other, I'm just going to have Tiff kick you. Getting through the end of these commits here, Richard Mosley III, he's corner at Stonehill College, 6'2", 190, quietly one of the more intriguing roster additions for me. He's got NFL size, 6'2", 190. That's hard to find, at this level. But I like especially that he's not afraid to come up and make a tackle. 63 total this past season, 2 forced fumbles, also had an interception and a sack. But when you watch him on film, good ball skills, good instincts. He's got the ability to make up a lot of ground with his long strides. And a lot like what I said about Lamondre Joe coming in last year, who probably was CSU's most consistent corner this past year. I love the physicality. I grew up, admiring Champ Bailey. He was one of my favorite players. What made Champ, on top of just being who I believe is the best, I believe he was the best cover corner of all time. But on top of that, like, Champ was such a dominant open field tackler. He wasn't going to pop you. So many guys want to pop you as corners. He's going to wrap you up and bring you down. And I like that about Mosley. And he feels like somebody who very easily could have landed at a bigger school and might just be one of the more under the radar type additions coming out of the FCS. And the Rams have had a lot of success with that recruiting approach in recent years, getting guys like Lamondre Joe from Missouri State, or, like Drew Moss coming up from Lamar a couple of years back. Now he's in the NFL. The Rams have done a good job of identifying some of those guys and being able to hit on them at this level. They'll also hope to do the same with Trayshawn Moore, 6'1", 190-pound safety out of West Georgia. Had 2 forced fumbles and an interception to go along with 61 total tackles this past year. Not a ton out there on him, but you like what you saw in a small clip from a physicality perspective, which you would hope to see out of the safety position. The DBs in general are a room I'm not super worried about going into next year. Maybe I'll end up looking dumb. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But I like some of the guys they've brought in, and I think hanging on to CJ Blocker and AJ Noland, and you're hoping, Dagan Myers can kind of make a leap. I think there's some pieces to work with there. Finally, wrapping up with the specialists, Mikaeli Numa out of North Texas, 11-12 on field goals last year, 22-28 in his career, 125 of 125 on extra points in his career. Only has a long of 46, so seemingly not the biggest leg in the world. But at this point, if you can give me a guy that goes 85% plus on 48 and under, I would take it at this point. We'll roll with what happens on the long kicks. The missed 45 yarders last year were what made me want to rip my hair out. Like, you've just got to be able to get those gimme points when they're on the board. If not, maybe you look at Kevon Craig, who's a specialist who's coming in from Wofford, primarily a punter, averaged 41.8 yards over 9 games. 15 inside the 20, just 3 touchbacks, 7 punts of 50 plus yards. Looks like he also can handle kickoffs. Looks like he also does have a kicking background as well. So we'll see. That was similar with Brian Hansen. A lot of those guys in high school are the kicker, the punter, the kickoff specialist. They kind of do it all. And then they specialize, as they get further along in their career. But both those guys, quietly important, right? You lose Brian Hansen to West Virginia after he had an awesome season. That one was a bummer to me. But you go out and you get some experienced players, and hopefully you're able to fill the void. You would have said the same thing last year, though. It just did not work out with Isaiah Hankins, unfortunately. Sometimes the P4 transfers work out, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's Jordan Noyes, who might be the best kicker they've had in the last 20 years, and sometimes it's situations like last year. Just somebody I'm going to have my eyes on these next couple of days. Linebacker Omar Diamande, one of the star players. The UConn defense wasn't very good last year. He's a stud, though. 116 total tackles, 6'1", 230, great frame. Had visits to like North Carolina, Penn State, some big-time programs. So probably a bit of a long shot, but has a really tight relationship with the linebacking coach at CSU. Obviously, they were together at UConn, kind of considers him a father figure, based on some of what I've been able to read on the situation. We'll see. CSU was the last school that he took a visit to, would be a huge addition. I mean, if you had him and Turner both coming in, I would feel really good about that linebacking core going into the season. So fingers crossed. Some of these guys you've missed on, but maybe they'll get lucky and they'll end up hitting on an absolute stud backer in Omar Diamande. Before we get out of here, I did want to talk a little bit of hoops to the folks going back and forth. You don't have to do it here. I do want to. I want to start by saying, to this point, it's been a pretty disappointing season. That's also not all that shocking with a first-year coach and as many moving pieces as you had, as many new players coming in. But you would have hoped to be more competitive at this stage. I think that's fair to say. I'm not one of these crazy people who's going to be like, hiring Ali was the wrong decision. We got to get him out of here or anything like that. That's dumb. He's first-year head coach. You have to give him an opportunity to learn and grow on the job. Nico was able to do that at multiple schools before he came over to CSU. That is the potential pitfall to going with first-year coach. And there have been moments where I think he's shown his greenness when it comes to some of the roster rotation stuff, when and when not to call timeouts. That's all going to be a feel it out process for a young head coach. And I believe in Ali because I've seen them work up in close, for close to a decade now. So I know he's going to figure it out. He's a really highly intelligent dude. He's a good person. He's a great recruiter, and he puts himself in a position where he's surrounded by other good coaches. He's not an egomaniac. And so I do believe that CSU made the right call there when Medved went to Minnesota. They lost a tough one last night. I felt like that Nevada lost a couple years ago with Gerard Lucas. But it's been underwhelming in league play, especially. And there have been moments where they show the potential. GCU was really good. Kerry Booth had some really nice moments. And there are moments where you don't even feel like you're watching the same team. Offensively, it's just been so out of whack without Kyle Jorgensen. It's really too predictable. I think part of the problem is, especially now that they've got Bemba back out there, they're trying to feed him in the high post, and that's great. That it creates a lot of opportunity for you, but that they knew that's what CSU was trying to do, and they're just sitting on it and it's creating turnovers, and they're trying to force it at times, and it just feels like if they can't get that first option, they panic and they don't know where to go from there, and they don't really have a true shot creator. Like Rhett can create his own shot. They have some guys that can space along the perimeter, but they don't have an Isaiah Stevens, a Neat Clifford, who can just get to wherever he wants on the floor and create a high-level opportunity for you. And you knew that was going to be the case. I mean, for a half decade straight, you had a projected NBA player on your roster and Roddy, and then, Stevens and Neek. And I still think Kerry Booth is somebody who will play at the next level eventually. And I think he's somebody they need to get more touches. I think they've got to prioritize getting the ball in his hands more. There are a couple of instances where you get him the ball along the baseline just with ease because he's bigger, stronger, more explosive than these Fresno players. They will get to the hoop and finish off the glass. Create opportunities for him there. He struggles at times with his back to the basket. That is something he's going to have to work on and refine if he does want to be a pro player. But the explosiveness is there, and obviously the three-point shooting as a whole this season has been good, although for most of the game last night, nobody could hit an outside shot. 2-18 in the first half is just ugly. They finished 8 of 29. So, I mean, you get to almost 30%, but you're 2 of 18 at one point. It's a big part of why you're down 12 points at halftime. And I don't know, just outside of Mooney's at times, I feel like they don't have anybody who can just put his head down and get to the hoop, And, and as the Toyota chat's pointed out here, Pasquarelli falling off a cliff in conference play is not something I anticipated. I'm at a loss for words right now with the stark difference with how he's looked in league play versus, the non-con. I think it's mental at this point. You can see him physically does not look comfortable when he's shooting. Maybe he's injured potentially. But I think you have to decrease Josh's minutes at this point if he's going to play like this. There were some instances where they were subbing defense for offense, and I think I would have rolled with Jace Butler at that point because I like his odds of hitting a shot last night more than I like Pasquarelli's, and I just think it's a funk he's going to have to play his way out of. But I mean, he's not a great defender, so if he's struggling to shoot the ball like that, it's hard to have him out there for as many minutes. And you've seen him play less minutes of late. So I think the staff is in line with what I'm saying, but I agree with Steve Ivey on the Toyota chat here. I think you gotta get more minutes for Rechsteiner. He's just the Rams' most consistent offensive weapon right now. He's really come into his own as the season's gone on. I would love to see him. I think especially next year, like if you can get Rechsteiner and Booth and Butler and some of these guys in the second year in the program, this team can be so good. Like we'll see what happens with the portal. It's all a crapshoot at this point. You're inevitably going to lose some of these players. But I think there's a lot to like about the individual potential of a lot of players on this roster. I think you're just feeling the struggle of trying to put all these pieces together. And without Jorgensen, they've been exposed a little bit offensively, which it's been a bummer. Again, I've already said this before, but you're not in a position where you're going to be competing for an at-large bid. So really, like at this point, while you want to win as many games as you can, I'm not saying these results don't matter. Losing in Fresno is embarrassing. They're a bad program and a bad team. You got to credit. They played hard, and they hit a lot of shots in this game. Some deep threes. They found a way to weather the storm. CSU, they go down 14, then they come all the way back. and to then, extend it right back to 8 the way they did, like that was a testament to their toughness, and they outplayed CSU. They deserve to win. All the credit to Fresno State, but that's not a good team. And to lose the way the Rams did was just, it was a bummer. And offensively, it's rough right now. It's been rough for 3 straight games, and they're going to have to figure it out. And, maybe that's leaning on some of these younger guys more, and maybe it's leaning on Rec more. But I would like to see them prioritize more post touches, find ways to get, Bemba and Booth the ball in the low block, not just at the top of the key there. And you're going to have to find a way to make an impact in the paint when the threes aren't falling. And there have been times where they've done that, and there have been long stretches where they just haven't been able to do that. And offensively, they've got to figure it out. They've just got to figure out how to create more consistently. They're not getting into the free throw line as much. They're not knocking down the open shots. A lot of things they were doing early in the season, they're just not doing well right now. And we'll see what happens as the season goes on. You're fortunately playing a Boise team on the road Friday who is also struggling a lot. Something's got to give on Friday, right? Both these teams lost multiple games in a row. Boise especially feels like their confidence is just shook. I don't think the Rams in the locker room have the same issues that maybe Boise does, but it's got to be better on both sides of the ball. And until it is, you're not going to win a lot of games in a really All right, we are going to overtime. The conversation continues at the DNVR.com. We'll get out of here in just a second. But yeah, like until you're able to create more consistent offense and until you can get better shot making across the board, it's going to be a lot of grinded out type games. And, it's probably going to be a coin flip on how many you pull out. It feels like they're about a 500 team right now in league play, which again, that's a bummer. The standard is higher than that. At this stage of the evolution of the program over the last decade, but also first-year coach, a lot of transfers. It's not shocking that they have had the issues, especially when compounded with injury struggles for your 2 most experienced and versatile players. And Jorgensen and Bemba, it was great to see Bemba back in the starting lineup. He's got to play his way into better shape, but it's a struggle right now. They're going to have to play their way through it. I'm not going to sit here and be like, the sky is falling, everything is over. I still wouldn't be surprised if this team made a run in the Mountain West tournament when healthy, because individually there's a lot of pieces to like, but they're just so all over the place when it comes to offensive consistency. And then defensively, it's been better, but they still give up way too many easy buckets, and they get killed in second chance points and points off of turnovers. It's not like they turn the ball over 20 times a game or they're giving up 20 offensive rebounds, but it does feel like the ones they give up are back-breaking. So you've got to eliminate some of that stuff. That's how you're beating yourself at the moment. And then you got to make some of these open shots. You're getting open looks. When you don't hit them, this is what it looks like. So that's where I'm at as far as hoops goes. I'm hoping to see them respond with a better performance on Friday night. Going to be a busy night for me. Also have Avs coverage, big home game, but a lot going on. Hope to see the Rams respond, because I love college basketball and I don't want it to be in a position, like 2022, 2023, a couple years ago, where it's just like you're kind of running out the clock and waiting for the season to be over. But thank you to everybody for tuning in. Much love to all of you in Ram Nation. Thank you for your patience this week. Much love to our incredible production staff as well. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Brandon Bills. Head to BrandonBills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.